last session of their conference. Dr. Richard Robbins is a distinguished teaching professor of anthropology here at SUNY Plattsburgh. He's the author of a number of award-winning books, which have been translated into 6 different languages. He received the SUNY Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Teaching and the American Anthropological Association McGraw-Hill Teacher of the Year Award. Richard has questions that were asked by our students that they have asked Zoe to discuss, and they will be talking about those later. Zoe Naylor has been a star of film, television, and stage for the past 25 years. In addition to her acting career, she runs wellness workshops, provides essential oil education, offers her service as doula, coach, and mentor, and facilitates mother blessings and moon circles. Zoe established Eagle Rose Productions, a production company which produces shows connecting people more deeply with their human experience. Despite her many accolades, Zoe says that her recent home birth of her son, Beau, is by far her greatest achievement to date. She has since co-founded Birth Time World and co-written and directed and produced Birth Time, the documentary, which garnered over 22 international awards to date and led to the development of this conference. Zoe, you have born 2 children. Perhaps you could start us off by talking about how the birth of your first child led to your decision to have a home birth for your second child, and how your experiences led to the production of the Birth Time documentary.
Oh,
That's an easy question.
but I just wanted to say, wow, Richard, look at your incredible work, life work. And Gloria, I know you've just busted your ass behind the scenes to put this on. And I just wanted to acknowledge both of you for making this opportunity for this exchange and discussion possible. Like, wow. I always, I hate bios. I hate bio introductions because I feel like we lose the human being. But yeah, I just really, I really, received your life achievement and life work. So thank you. Oh goodness. So here we are. It's funny because Beau's about to turn 6. So perhaps I need to change the word recent from that introduction that people curate.
6 still sounds like recent. Does
it?
Yeah.
It's funny as you get older, you hold on to
I think
a decade. Oh dear. Yeah. So, oh goodness, it's interesting. I had my first mother-daughter night with Sophia last night, ever, and she's about to turn 10. And I really looked at her, and I just see the new generation, and it really was because of her that we've come to be, in this place with this piece of work, this documentary, being able to be viewed around the world, and the body of work that is Birth Time following behind it. And it was because with her birth, at that point in my life, I hadn't yet started what I call my awakening journey. Look, that's a word that's bandied around as woo-woo, but really you could call it healing, recovery, whatever. And I had come from a system of living which was high achievement. So I was, head girl of my high school, scholarships to university, accolades, all the external trappings of what society calls success. Maybe that's why I get triggered by bios. And so I had, the A+ bio, but really no deep reverence or connection for this world from another embodied perspective. And there are, for women and people, certain rites of passage, and birth is absolutely a rite of passage. It's actually an opportunity to, it will transform you. The first is birth. We are transformed from a soul to a physical being. The second is for women and people, their menarche or their moon time. It's when they become a maiden. And then if we traverse that consciously, because women, we cycle with the moon and we're incredibly powerful creatures, but in the Western world, we're generally shamed for menstrual cycles. We're told they're difficult, they're annoying, here's a tampon or a pad, off you go, get on with life. So there's no reverence for that first initiation. And then the second or the third big one is birth. And that is where you traverse the threshold of getting to know your innate power. And I thought I was powerful, but really it was an ego construct of external success, like I mentioned before. So when I came to go through that rite of passage, I was really asleep or ignorant. I thought that, oh yeah, I'll just it was just, I'd just push the baby out and get on with it in a way. I was lucky that I'd had a miscarriage before I conceived Sophia. So in the, as you start to go, if you're a woman in a Western world, I believe we're conditioned to be prime ministers, not mothers. So I had started my about face, if you will, from those drivers that were going to take me to Hollywood. And after that miscarriage, I started to obviously connect with people in the birth space. So by the time Sophia came along, I'd started to get inklings of what was kind of required, but didn't really pay attention. And I had an obstetrician and private hospital, which again, a lot of the West considered to be the gold standard. That's ignorant, in my opinion, in my experience. And I booked her in. And then as I was going along in that pregnancy, I met some, angels come on your path when you want to shift and wake up. And so women were kind of coming into my sphere saying, oh, have you got a doula? And I was like, oh, what's a doula? And I really wasn't, I was really uneducated around birth. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I better get a doula. And the hospital that I was booked into suddenly said to me, oh, no, you can't bring a doula here. And I thought, oh, I knew enough around healing in my body that was a red flag. So I thought, okay, well, I better change hospitals. And then that obstetrician couldn't work at another one. So then I found my way to a midwife group practice. And that was on the Northern Beaches. And then that was where you get assigned one woman, one midwife, which was amazing. Like in this country, in Australia, that really is, if you can get into the midwife group practice, that's amazing. And so then I started to have that one woman, one midwife approach where I had the same lady. I was starting to build trust with her. I started to develop an intimate relationship with her. And then when I went into labor, this is where that fell apart for me, because that midwife wasn't on call in the midwife group practice when I went into labor. And I had a doula, but the doula I didn't choose that consciously either. So what I needed, I went into labor and my contractions were 0 to 100 straight off the bat. It was like a freight train. I felt like I was holding onto the back of this freight train going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, totally out of control in my body. Sophia was coming, and what she was teaching me was, wow, you just didn't have any respect for this in what's required to pull off birth in a way that is conscious. It's not to say it's not hard, it's hard, but in a way that you're really setting yourself up for the best outcome. We have athletes who go to the Olympics and they have whole teams. Birth is like going to the Olympics, and we just go into it without preparation and real reverence for what I said before as a rite of passage. So I'm holding onto the back of the freight train, and I honestly, in that birth, I felt like I couldn't do it because the doula didn't come until very late. I was full-thrown labor for very quickly. The midwife wasn't on call. I was alone. And that was triggering for me. And my partner had a child from his first marriage, but he'd had obstetric-led care, so he really didn't know what was going on. Gosh, I didn't know what was going on. He's not going to know what's going on. And I just remember I was actually in transition, and I didn't realize in transition, and I felt that I could push, but no one was telling me, like I was just, totally out alone. And I remember in that birth thinking, oh my goodness, I can't do it. I need to get to the hospital and have an epidural. And in that moment, I felt like, for me, in the history that I've had in traversing my struggles, I just felt like I'd fail. I felt like I couldn't do it. And I really felt like birth was going to define me. So I got out of this bath, got to the hospital. I remember walking like, the ghost marshmallow man from Ghostbusters. I'd walk nude, get me the epidural. And I remember getting there, and the midwife then on duty, she checked me and said, actually, you can push your baby out. And in that moment, it was the first time someone said, actually, you're doing it. And I just remember this leap for joy. I got in the bath, and 20 minutes later, she was born. But what had happened, because I'd been so alone in that process, firstborn child's hard enough, the about face from being so career focused to mothering, the lack of respect for the rite of passage, it just, yeah, I didn't really set myself to up for that initiation into motherhood in a way that was really, really robust and really strong. So then, postnatal depression had ebbs and flows. I still, I was a long-term breastfeeder and attachment mother, and I had great women mentors at this point. But I just, I just said, wow, I just missed a whole part of the possibility of birth with Sophia. And she, I believe, has called me forth into the next birth, which was Beau. So by the time I conceived Beau, I was like, okay, what did I miss? How could I do it differently? And the only way that you can really uphold pure continuity of midwifery care is, I believe, at home. I think midwife group practices are incredible and so vital. And in fact, they will be the bridge. But in this country, 3% choose 0.03% of people choose home birth, less can access home birth. In this country, 8% of women can access continuity of midwifery care. And so Beau, I chose a team like an athlete. I chose a doula, I chose a midwife, and I had him right behind me here, actually where the table is, and you'll see it in the opening of the film. And Beau was posterior, and it was a much more difficult labor than Sophia, actually, but I was held. I had a mother blessing setting me up for that birth, not a baby shower. And by the time that labor happened, even though it was so hard, when I was traversing that transition and I looked at Jo and went, I can't do it. She looked at me and went, yes, you can. And I had this healing of generations of going, I trust women. I'm supported by women. I allow women to love me. It was incredible. It was like 15 years of therapy like that. And the first thing, and my whole family said I was going to traumatize Sophia having her at the birth. And the first word she says on the movie is, wow. If that's not the quintessential moment of humanity, I don't know what is. And then no postnatal depression, I've had no struggle, still, off days as a mum, but as a whole, I was able to show up more fully as a mum and enjoy that career of motherhood, which is so undervalued. And when you can see your child who's had the best of you, and then Sophia, who I just adore, but hasn't always had the best of me, that bit breaks your heart. So you just I just want women and people to know what's possible. What is possible when you really are nourished and held through that incredibly powerful rite of passage. And that's the long answer to your question.
No, that's a wonderful answer. I mean, as an anthropologist, I mean, your notion, of course, that it's a rite of passage resonates. And rites of passage and rituals in general are dramas, very much. And to what extent did your career as an actor influence your approach to childbirth in terms of designing, as it were, a ritual, a drama that makes it, so different than what most women experience in childbirth?
I'm so pleased you've asked this question, because I've actually been reflecting on it a lot of late with my partner. I feel like my career is shifting now, but acting gave me a pathway to my feelings. It gave me a pathway to feel. Because I had been driven to feeling was, as kids were chin up, move on, you're distracted from your feelings. Mine were nourished or pushed into achieving, and that's the strategy that I chose to cope with my arousal or any feelings I was having, not towards them. And so a lot of the work in the last 10 years has been with long-term therapy and things, is to how do we lean into my own feelings, my partner's feelings, and my kids' feelings, right? So I feel like acting was the precursor, the gift that allowed me to feel, because my feeling is the only way to heal is to feel, because in that and moving your body, you get to get more in touch with your innate self. Otherwise, you're a construct of the strategies that you've embodied in order to survive the traumas of childhood. And so I will be forever grateful for it. So really, acting allowed me permission to fully feel. And in being able to feel, I wasn't afraid to, birth was tough, but I wasn't afraid to, the feeling was I could cross the bridges to feelings, even if it was hard, going, rah, women vocalizing, like it's the most primal thing ever, and women are quiet, like almost terror in their bodies. And birth is the opposite. So if we have no semblance of being able to feel any of that juice, in the moment of birthing is not the moment to start,
How would, I guess the question then is you, to some extent, again, through your career, were able to design a narrative, a ritual, a drama that you found rewarding. I guess a number of questions come out from there, but how do you empower other women to do the same? I'm assuming now, I may be wrong, that the narrative that a woman designs and wants for that passage is going to vary, obviously, according to their own experiences, their desires, and so on. And it would seem that one of the jobs of midwives is, to some extent, help each person design their ritual or drama in a way that's satisfying to them, as you seem to have done with yours. How do you engineer that kind of a change? Because, of course, right now the ritual is set. It's a very male-dominated ritual. It is generally one in which women are subsumed, again, within a male narrative, essentially. And, how do you get these other narratives written and then develop, for each person? To some extent, I'm asking you that as an actor, would be someone certainly well equipped to design those dramas.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not about that, actually. Acting, it's not the actress in me, it's the entrepreneur. It's the visionary. So actually, I think women and people need to reclaim, first of all, have a sense of what's possible, feel confident enough to know in their body that they can design it, take the action required to implement the vision. Do you know? So actually it comes back to an innate connection with oneself. How you get to know yourself and build that trust with yourself is the key. So I think all paths lead to Rome. It doesn't matter how you get there. But a lot of women have the birth they need to have for the first time in order to activate something deep within them to go, oh, that was terrible. The trouble is most women people fall victim to that first experience, and they never have that bridge to go, oh, it couldn't be different next time. They just have the induction that leads to the Caesar. That's not to say all inductions leads to Caesars, but some are really necessary. But there's a lot in the percentages we found in the movie, like 36% now in this country Caesar rate. Some countries it's at 88%. You can't tell me that's normal when the World Health Organization says 10 to 15% means better outcomes for mothers and babies. So what I'm saying is the culture is informing and affecting that woman's ability to take that birth and want to change it. So as a coach or a mentor or a doula or whatever women want to work with, however women want to work with me, it's about helping them find that innate sense of power. But if it's taken from birth, this is the problem. Like they say, heal birth, heal the world. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. If we heal birth and first-time mothers' births, we're not going to chase our tails so much trying to fix everything. Because I know the decisions and the life I've chosen since birthing my children, and especially more Beau, has changed the decisions I'm making about nutrition, my decisions around going back to full-on work, where we live, how we, nourish, all of it, how we raise our children. It just informs everything. So I think it's not about, it's just helping people come back to knowing that they can design it, and then giving people the tools, confidence, and the strategies to start to take charge of that outcome.
Let me, to some extent, speak, like an anthropologist, and knowing the difficulty involved in changing a culture. Because again, what traditional births are in hospitals, excuse me, et cetera, are dominated by a certain metaphor, narrative, et cetera, that sees women essentially as submissive, where again, men are in fact are serving them by helping, et cetera, et cetera. And how do you change that? I'm sort of doing extemporaneous stuff because Gloria gave me a whole list of questions that her students asked to ask.
Oh yeah.
And one of them right off the bat, talking about the documentary, kind of relates to what we're talking about. And it said, after the release of the documentary, has the government made I assume the Australian government, has the government made progress to hear the voice of the women, or has there been change or resistance, I guess, for that matter?
Well, you know how Hannah, oh no, who was it? Kath Devaney says it's a big ship and it's going to take time to turn. I feel in a way, sadly, the documentary's current, but it's almost 10 years ahead of its time in the connection of policy and what we need. So interesting, here we are, how like we released it, was it last? It's all a bit of a blur with COVID. We've just been approached by the Labor government here, which is not the leading government currently in power, but might be after this next election, to do a screening. So I felt that the documentary gave voice to the 50 years of activism in research, like people, incredible midwives leaving vocations to go and do PhDs to public research to change policy. We just kind of gave a unified voice across the Western and developed world for all of the people who have been working to try and change the system everywhere. And that convergence is like the start. And now we're going into universities, and here we are, and like training the midwives coming in and seeking out politics from the top. But that joining or that meeting so that actually there's a turning point, I feel like it's another 3 to 5 years maybe in the way it seems to be showing up. So it kind of has to come from all angles to change culture. If we let it go right now, like if the dominant narrative, I'm hearing Caesars in like everywhere, women choosing them, like not even like, I feel almost like, it's we're losing it. We're losing it, so we have to get it out. Like cicadas, like on your own, it's hard to be heard, but together we're deafening. And that's our totem for the work. And it came, you just were, speaking with Mel Briggs, it came when we were on her land, interviewing her after her interview. This cacophony of cicadas came up, which were deafening. And so we'd been told to keep an ear out for, an eye out for that totem. So it's like we just can't give up, because I think with enough people seeing this movie and enough conversation, there will be a tipping point, if we're converging from the top down, where we have the possibility to help women go, actually, it's much cooler to get continuity of midwifery care and birth at home or in the midwife group practice, birth houses. It's almost got to come from, all the angles, really.
One of the things that I'm interested in is to some extent the economic aspects of this. And to some extent, the commodification of birth, generally. I know in the United States and probably in Australia, most hospitals, clinics, et cetera, are being bought out by investors that, again, expect a rate of return on their investments. And so you're fighting against that. But one of the ironies of this that I see, and maybe you can shed light on it, is that you would think that the other major powerful body controlling medicine, I think in Australia and certainly the United States, is the insurance industry. And one would think that the insurance industry would be, very much allies in doing what you want to do. Because again, it simply would not be as expensive and so on and so forth. Have you run across anything about that, or in terms of the role of the insurance companies in this whole thing?
Bashi Hazard, who I think you also spoke to, who's in our film, and Sally Tracy, Professor Sally Tracy, like the economics of birth, like it's so enmeshed. insurance companies, obstetric care. It's part of that system. If there's anything I've noticed in COVID, it's this rising up of this new world that people are espousing, you know, like it's not woo-woo. There is actually a shift in a planetary way around what's possible for humanity, right? So while the insurance companies and obstetrics are staying in control of the old paradigm and the kind of patriarchal, the end of the patriarchal era, there is this other possibility emerging. We're never gonna change it by trying to go to that force field. We're gonna have to be grassroots, sharing this work, woman to woman, person to person, joining the webs from around the world, women choosing in their own backyard to birth differently. And then that will all join. It's not going to come from dismantling it from the top. It's too enmeshed. That system has to fail. And the only way it's going to fail is if the women and the people rise up from underneath. That's how I perceive it.
Well, one of the other questions that one of the students asked relates a little bit to this. They say in the film, it mentions how the feminist movement was able to bypass freedom at birth, which is one of the most important rites of passage for women. They ask, why exactly is that? Why do you need to be a feminist to become a midwife? And what is the relationship of women giving birth and feminism?
Oh, it's a great question, because I hated feminism. I hated that word. I hated being a feminist before I did this documentary. I thought it was man-hating. I just thought it was all rim and rahing and all angry, you know, just needing more therapy. I really was judgmental and dismissive. I had no idea what it really meant. When you come to apply feminism in the birthplace, it actually made so much sense to me, because like the vintage footage in the archival footage in the film, like women have actually been repressed and oppressed in all ways, but in birth in a way that's just disgusting.
Yeah.
Or revering and respecting what and who women are and people are. So I had this new sense of feminism in birth and how important it was to really be a bastion for that, because that is the one place that women can really reclaim their power, not in what I call the Hillary Clinton pantsuit way, but like in a sovereign, gentle, embodied power. It's a different kind of way, you know? Yeah, it's so important that we're feminists in birth, actually.
Also, I'm going off script here also, but
Go off script.
How did your partner relate to to essentially your narrative of birth? And how essential is that? I obviously would think it would be very essential. And how do you gain that kind of support that you see in the film? You see develop actually in the film.
That's a great question. I shouldn't look. I'm reticent to speak for Aaron because he's not here to answer that himself. But my feeling is, having watched him we've been together 10 years, and I know he speaks to this in the film and has on stage, is that it was an invitation, but I had to go first to be able to invite him across the bridge. And at first, he was like all men, not because he was controlling, but because he was in the culture of fear. Like, is home birth safe? Like, just was naturally in loving me, wanting the best for me and our children, but just ignorant around possibility. So the great thing about Aaron is he's seen obstetric-led, epidural-induced disconnection around birth, and then he's seen midwife group practice, and then the blessings, and then where that falls down, you know, being on call or not on call, and then what is possible in a home birth, where he was invited to be included in the birth in none of the other scenarios the same way. You know, like, profoundly changed him, his respect for me as a woman, his own sense of role as a father, what it means for our unit. Like, it changes the men. In fact, I've met people as we've traveled, when men see women birthing powerfully, it changes alcoholism, addiction, like it shifts them. It's a rite of passage for the men too. But again, if you put the man in the back of the room and you make him feel like he's in the way, like in so many hospitals, he's missing out too. Like, it's such a gift for so many fathers when they get invited in. And yeah, gosh, there's so much work to be done around and how to even show up to support. Like Aaron's pressure points with Beau, because he was posterior. Like, God, I needed him. On the same night that I birthed Beau, 19 women birthed at RPA, which is a big hospital here in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. And there was 5 midwives on duty. Now, they would not have been able to be with the women. Now, Joe and Aaron, every contraction put those pressure points on my back. And so a posterior baby is face up. It's a lot more difficult labor, painful. And, I didn't have any pain relief support here. So those pressure points were so important. And having his support, his masculine strength in that way was so beautiful for our relationship. That was such a gift.
Now, the film also plays up the contribution of Indigenous knowledge in childbirth. And of course, speaking again as an anthropologist, I mean, there are many societies where, in fact, men play a major role. Certainly not diminishing that of the birth. And there's obviously a lot to learn there in terms of how it's done and what the contributions are. Back in Australia, particularly in terms of Indigenous,
When we filmed on Mel Briggs's the lands that she's from, and the Aboriginal women that we met when we filmed, they were some of my favorite. And in fact, I've become friends with some of them, and they've come to the Bilpin property and they have run ceremony here. And if I could sit, I remember we were filming in Alice Springs, a remote area, and there was a group of Aboriginal women, and they were sitting around, and they were threading a necklace, and they were getting fire pokers to poke the seeds to then thread a necklace to sell. Now, watching it was kind of excruciating, right? Because they would get the poker in terms of productivity, and they would try to poke the seed, and then they would laugh. And I mean, they might have poked 1 seed an hour, but the point was they were sitting in so much joy, connection. It was a quintessential life lesson of this is where it's at. And us Western women come with our drivers and arousal systems, which are conditioned through generations, going, oh my God, frustrated. And we are missing the point. So every time I'm even in the presence of the Aboriginal women and men, I just could sit down. It makes me emotional and weep for just, this land was stolen from them, and we have such incredible wisdom that they're, just to be in the presence. If you ever are gifted that, just be in their presence and just receive the energy of that beingness, because it's so beyond white man, in my opinion. It's just, amazing.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, we have a question I'll read to you from Bashi Hazard, who's watching. And Zoe is absolutely right. We're confronting financial, legal, and political forces that are accustomed to dehumanizing and controlling women's bodies to pursue their interests in maternity health services. And I guess to some extent that summarizes a lot of what's happening. Let me read another question from the students. Recently, with the COVID pandemic, a lot of women have faced the choice of doing a home birth or going to the hospital during the outbreak. How did this affect survival rates of babies that were born at home versus the ones at the hospital? Do you, again, know anything about that, or
again,
have you followed
I'm not
that?
at the coalface, but I have had a look. I don't want to share out of school here, but I've in chatting with Joe, a lot of women came to home birth who wouldn't usually, which is really interesting, because I'm not sure how it was over there, but here you couldn't take your partner into the birth space. And so my intuitive feeling, and I can't speak to the statistics, but the trauma that we're going to see in the mothers who have endured laboring and birth in the system during the pandemic is going to be extraordinary. I mean, I think about, you know, the privileged position that I had to even have the experiences that I have. And I think about what is going on in there and being alone in that rite of passage. That, you know, it's devastating on all the levels, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, like, let alone the statistics around. I just, it's been such a big few years, hasn't it?
Well, you've contributed to a lot of thought. Let me ask you another question. Millie Hill stated in the documentary that hospitals did not have the right environment for birthing. And Mel also stated, quote, each time I went into the hospital environment, I think my body shut down. What must a hospital birthing environment look like? If they're, of course, going to be in hospitals.
I think that's an oxymoron, isn't it? An anomaly. Like, I think some of the beautiful experts we interviewed, we have to get women out of the hospitals. Birth is not a medical procedure. It is not an illness. It is an invocation to life. So don't put the women and people in the systems and the buildings that are energetically holding sickness. It's just not the place. So I can only speak from my own experience, but look, going at first into that, you know, big private hospital when I was having, versus the energy of being like, you can't compare. But I think we're so systemized in the way we live, and everyone's in the cities, in buildings, inside, in computers, and like, we feel comfortable in the box. And it's interesting on my own healing journey, like, I could not have spent time in the mountains, in the space now, without doing a lot of that internal healing work to regulate my arousal system so that I was more at ease in the space. You know, people say get into nature, but when you're in nature, all your feelings come that you're masking by staying busy in the system of living. So it's also, like you were tapping on earlier, the cultural norm of our energetic bodies, you know, and what we feel safe in. And people feel safe in a hospital, but only because they're not embodied in themselves in a way, and culturally that it's not informing them that actually in more natural settings it's better. Now, it's a big bridge to that place. So my feeling is as if we could have birth centers, like, so when you fall pregnant, you call your midwife, and that's normal, and it's funded. Because like you were saying before, the money is obscene. Like, you could put the money that the government, the taxpayers are paying for Caesars into birth centers, and everyone goes, and the birth center's the norm. And those suites look beautifully, you know, they're maybe in and out spaces, there's nature outside in. They just look, if women are not feeling safe yet to birth at home, then birth centers are the bridge. And then hospital is if you need it. Like, Joe's transfer rate is 7%. That's a healthy rate. So women are not broken. You know, we are amazing creatures that are alive and powerful. So let women have the possibility of knowing that for themselves. So yeah, I think birth centers is the action step, if you will. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you another question then related to that. You said before that a lot of what you've done is based on an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
What would you think of establishing essentially a birthing franchise?
Well, we actually, 10% of all proceeds, this is interesting, of our merchandise for birth time, because it's part of the vision of the movement. If you have all the cicadas out there wearing the t-shirts, people go, what's that? Then that, you know, starts conversation. But 10% of all proceeds is going to the establishment of Birth Time HQ, which is headquarters. And that was going to start as a central place for us to run workshops and do clinical work, doula, you know, all sorts of things. From that, we saw the rollout of, well, I saw the rollout of Birth Time I don't want to speak for the other girls in case they go, oh my God, we're not doing birth centers, but it's possible to be birth time hubs or centers.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the only ones visioning this, though. Jane Collins from she founded the School of Shamanic Womancraft. She's going to establish birth centers. So I feel like that's all very possible. Maybe in this new world that's going to emerge if we come back to more community-based living. So like the tribes or the clans that used to be here, you know, had different sections of the country. You have different communities, and each community had its own birth center. So making it more, you know, intimate. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I'm open for all of it. I just don't know how many hours I have to do it. I guess you just have a massive team. Bashi can do the legals if she's on it. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a crass question. I mean, if you were going to do this, how would you advertise them? What would you tell women that would attract them to those centers? I mean, we could have a game of imagining commercials and what they might look like. But what would you say?
In New Zealand, there's big billboards that say, you know, call your midwife. It's government funded for women to birth with midwives. So how would we? I feel like I'd get into Bill Gates and tell him to stop funding bloody vaccination, and why don't you start putting your money philanthropically to birth centers? Although I think it needs to come from a woman, quite frankly. I mean, once they're built, I think. I learned this with birth time, that pulling off that movie to get it to that level required huge business decisions at certain moment. I call it the big girl pants decisions.
Right.
And if I was projecting onto a decision that needed to be made here when I was only at this decision, I couldn't see it. But each step was guided. We worked we call her Madam Birth Time. So working with spirit, guiding conscious enterprise or entrepreneurial endeavors, I believe is the way. And you're really in service to that communion. And each decision was guided. So here you are asking me how to roll out birth centers at a time. That would just become clear. Like if Coca-Cola can still get us to buy Coke to drink, it's not going to be hard to get the masses through social, it'd just be money, and money's just energy. So that's a detail to me.
Well, let me take it to the next step. Let me take it to the detail.
Oh, okay, great.
You know, right now there's about conservatively $450 trillion out there in the world that has to get invested somewhere. That's money that is seeking a rate of return. Now, it strikes me that there are a lot of investors out there, or wealth managers for that matter, who would see that as a wonderful opportunity. Certainly, if you could get the support of the insurance companies, who again are among the biggest investors, by the way, about $100 trillion a year. So how would you get them? I mean, it seems it's there. I mean, if it's there the way you say it is, it would seem to be a logical step to get out there and fundraise for opening these birth centers.
I think you said it, you nailed it before, rate of return. The rate of return has to be measured not by dollars, but by the energetic gifts that you're giving the women and people who are birthing. And in that we have better mothers, and then we have better the whole planet changes. So I feel like we have companies setting up philanthropic ventures as tax havens.
Right.
So just by helping them morph to birth center, I mean, this is great, right? It's not an investment for a return financially, but it's an investment that will give back in all the ways that philanthropy should be underpinned by. I think it's just getting into the awareness of the people. Like, I'm amazed in this country, like still people haven't seen the film. Our job is just to get this film into as many people's computers and homes. You can plug your laptop now into your computer and watch it, you know, with your partner, on your own, with your family. Like, we just need more people. We need the education first. When everyone's got the awareness, okay, because everyone watches a film and goes, even my sister who's had her babies goes, oh my goodness, I think I want that. I want what the film says. Okay, I want continuity of care. So first step. Once everyone's saying they want that, then we need to give them the place to go to get it. And that's when the birth centers come in. So I just believe that I'm going to be put, or we're going to be put, or people are going to be put into face to face with people with heaps of money. And if it's not them, it'll be us, because like you say, there's trillions of dollars sitting there to be circulated. It's just the meeting of the right person who then says, great, I'm going to buy these 5. If TV shows can do it, to do a show like The Block here, just buy 5 plots, 1 in each state, build them, done. And then the midwives are hungry, the graduates are hungry to kind of start in a different mode of practice, because they're burning out in the system. The burnout rate in New Zealand, we learned, was shocking. Incredible vocation and women leaving, practitioners leaving. So then to me, it's logical. Then they get filled, then we have better, the midwives are enjoying their practice, they're more fulfilled, we have it supported. I mean, it's probably a 10-year vision, but it's so doable, really.
Well, my point actually is that it would be profitable. That is, it would be financially. That is, the rate of return, certainly if you're an insurance company with, again, their $100 trillion to invest, actually more now, that they would jump at the opportunity, because. But
then the fact that the fact, it's interesting, and I haven't really explored this with anyone, right? Yeah. Insurance companies are insuring businesses from a basis of fear that something's going to go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. No, not necessarily. Yeah.
No, or are they doing it from a place of protecting everybody? So
well, if they can prevent something from going wrong. I mean, in the United States, the insurance company were behind seatbelt laws or bicycle helmet laws.
Okay.
Okay, and so they have a vested interest, in fact, in protecting. If they can do that, and if they can do that profitably. I mean, suddenly we're talking about birthing, and now we're talking about business, but. And I'm not a business person. I'm an anthropologist who does study finance, but nevertheless, it would seem to be right now a golden opportunity, given the paucity of investment opportunities now, that starting birth centers, with our lights just went out, but starting birth centers would be a very attractive proposition.
Maybe that's the spirit saying we shouldn't be talking about putting insurance.
No, I think it's the insurance company saying save energy, and the lights go out automatically, I think.
Yeah, I think it's an absolutely interesting conversation. We won the way we were funded to go to the Northern Territory was through a beautiful insurance company called Hoddle. Yeah, I think that the insurance company has to have a consciousness around really wanting to get behind the point before it's about making a buck. I've found that in all the business relationships we've had, people have to care and really go far out. This is the gateway, because we've had documentaries about the oceans and plastic and fashion, and they're all amazing. But actually, more important than all of that is birth, because if you get birth right, then all of that, the mother, you just choose more consciously the way you are. You're not struggling, so you go, fuck it. I call it the fuck it. So you go, it's too tired, can't think, just going to pull all the stuff in, because you're not coping. So, yeah, it's cultural, I think, but good idea.
No, you're right. But the benefits are so great, because again, with birth centers as the center of the process, what you do in terms of what you save later on, in terms of stress, mental distress, parenting, and so on, are enormous.
That has to be, like, you see, back to our chat earlier, from all levels, policymakers down. Like, it has to also come out of the hands of the government believes that obstetric-led care is the best. It has to change it from a policy point of view. Then we can't have what's happened in New Zealand, where the government was on board, but the midwives are squeezed now. It's like teachers, paid terribly for the work that they do, which is so fundamental. Because, while Kirsten Small was amazing, she was an obstetrician in our film who's retrained as a midwife. That's amazing. And she said, you go in as not to say obstetricians aren't great, we need them. They absolutely save lives. But the ego around, you are the golden child, you are the way, they don't even see normal physiological birth. You're trained to cut. Like, But that's what the government and the insurance companies and the culture is saying is the best holder of birth. So
Hmm.
this has to be in all the ways. And look, maybe it has to be that the birth centers are set up first, whether they're birth times or whoever's doing them, and then what happens usually in this slow beast of a system is then the statistic comes out about the outcomes, and you take it to Parliament, you present your findings, and
Hmm.
then they go, oh, that's interesting. But while there's an enmeshment of insurance and money, and there's money to be had in birth, which is why I get a bit triggered about talking about making money in
Hmm.
birth, because at the moment that's what's happening. People are making money in birth and traumatizing and dismembering women's ability to
Yeah.
have that powerful rite of passage. It's
Yeah.
actually a human rights issue,
Hmm.
which is what she says.
Yeah. Um, One of the areas I think I'm coming from, you're raising this sort of path, is that we all know there are all kinds of problems. Um, Hunger, environmental, climate change, etc. And one of the things we often lack in talking about them is steps to fix them
Yeah.
in some way. And finding the problems is relatively easy. Finding ways to fix them, not so easy. And yet it strikes me you've hit upon a solution, a
Mm.
very real solution that is plausible, for which there is some sentiment, to go to. And I find that fascinating, and I find it a wonderful opportunity. And I guess one other question, I know what it means is marshaling the forces that would turn this into a reality. I talked about the insurance companies, Indigenous peoples, etc. But how do you marshal the medical profession, particularly doctors,
You don't. We try.
to,
I mean,
well, you had in the film, of course, physicians
well,
that were very
yes,
supportive.
true. True. We did, and we've had screenings, in hospitals, and
Yeah.
obstetricians have come, but the women and the birthing people have to seek it out. It has to come from a demand point of view, which is why if we, Anthony Robbins, he'll say, go to the vision and work back step by step to the action step. And the action step here is just to get everyone to see the movie,
Mhm.
like full stop, because then there's a conversation. And this film stays with you in a way you can't shake it. Like my sister, like I said, she took herself the other day, and her youngest is 5, she's had her babies, back to an obstetrician, simply made an appointment, paid for it, to feel whether it felt like the movie left her feeling. That's crazy.
Mm.
It stays with the psyche and the energetic body. So if everyone just sees the doco, that's all we have to do. It's so overwhelming right now with where the planet is and where everything's going. We just have to have something very simple. We change birth, we change the world. Just get your friends and family to see the film. And then that's it for today.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're jumping to places. And like we found out, like in the movie, that postnatal depression absolutely can be, shifted from the way you birth.
Hmm.
I'm a case in point about that. And, like any trauma that's inflicted physiologically, emotionally can be just absolutely here. Like lineages of trauma that you're in therapy for can be absolutely shifted through that rite of passage. Like it's just change birth, change the world.
I have one more question.
Go for it. This is fun.
Um, Having watched the film, having certainly talked to you, uh, having again a wife who's very, very, conscious of these issues, and we planned our births accordingly. Having a daughter that gave birth at home in a pool. I certainly am aware of both the advantages and the willingness of women to birth that way. And I get the impression, and it may be wrong, that if offered the opportunity of birth centers, just to take one idea, that a good number, if not most women, would select that option. Is that a faulty assumption?
Sadly, I think so. I think we still have a lot of women feeling like hospital's the safest place.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like, but if one woman has the birth and then they share the film and that film gets in the being, the bridge from the system that's currently in place, the best, most realistic, tangible gift is a birth center, because it's like that halfway point, like you're saying, between home and a hospital. It feels like, and if look, the birth centers can be near, if they need to be near a hospital, so women in their mind go, okay, if something goes wrong, I feel safe, or the partners, like, to take the things out of the equation that are informing the culture of fear.
Right.
But then once they're in there, they're in a different energetic container and they get that beautiful continuity. And then all of a sudden, I think you're bang on saying that's a really big missing key. We need access points in birth centers for all women, not 8% here,
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're going off now to see the film. I've actually seen it, but
good. Yeah, I was going to say it was a great chat.
We've got an audience waiting to see it, and we'll do everything we possibly can to get people to see it. And thank you so much, for being willing to join us.
I just also want to say thank you to you guys for the opportunity, and just to say, like, wherever you are on your journey of birthing is absolutely beautiful. And it's not that Caesars are wrong, inductions are wrong, epidurals are wrong, but just know that the percentages of those applications and interventions are out of whack. And so come back to yourself and just don't be afraid to just look at this like you're going to the Olympics and you're going to win the gold medal, and really revere it for what it is. This birth is a rite of passage. So you set yourself up for the best possible outcome for you. And if it's held by continuity of midwifery care, you might be disappointed, but you're not going to be traumatized. It's a big difference, And I just wish everyone all the best, and see the movie. And thank you, Richard, for this beautiful chat.
Thank you. So that was wonderful.
Thank you.
And Gloria is doing everything she possibly can to get as many people to see the film as possible.
I know.
So
I know.
But take care, and thanks again.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Bye.